The question is, what's the easiest way to solve this equation? X minus 3 quantity squared equals 25. The easiest way to solve this is to understand that when the square of something equals 25, then whatever that something is either plus 5 or negative 5. You know, only two numbers you can square to get 25, 5 and negative 5. So that x minus 3 is going to be plus or minus the square root of 25, that is plus or minus 5. Otherwise, when you square it, you wouldn't get 25. Okay, so x minus 3 is plus or minus 5. Well, that breaks into two equations. X minus 3 is 5, or x minus 3 is negative 5. Now, x minus 3 equals 5, of course, gives us x equals 8. I don't have to explain that. X minus 3 equals negative 5 gives us x equals negative 2. You don't need me to explain that. So our solution set would include 8 and negative 2. Okay, ignore this. This comes from way over here. Next question, x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. And we want to solve this by completing the square. Now, we could easily solve this by factoring. We can see easily this factors into x minus 5 and x plus 1 with solutions 5 and negative 1. That's not what we want to do. Now, completing the square is not something we're going to typically use to solve a quadratic equation. There are easier methods. It is the way we derive the quadratic formula, but I'm probably not going to ask you to derive that, at least maybe an extra credit problem or something. But it is important in certain other applications, and this is a good place to learn the process so that when we get to those applications, you're not stumbling over the process. And this is a natural part of the theory of how to solve a quadratic equation. So we go back to this. Okay, we want to complete the square on x squared minus 4x. The minus 5 doesn't enter into the completing of the square, but of course it's still going to be there in the equation after we've completed the square. So x plus 4x plus what is a perfect square? Well, we dealt with this previously. You can review those videos. But what it comes down to is we're going to add the square of half of negative 4. Okay, so we got negative 4 here, and for reasons that I'm not going to go through the explanation of right now because I don't want to distract us, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take half of the negative 4, which is negative 2, square it, and add it, and that's going to give us the number we need to make this into a perfect square. So we do that. X squared minus 4x plus 4 is a perfect square. You can verify that that's the square of the quantity x minus 2. So what are we going to do with that? Well, now we've got x squared minus 4x minus 5. That's what's going to be on the left side of this equation, and that's going to be equal to 0. Let's see. X squared minus 4x minus 5 is what? Well, we can write that as x squared minus 4x plus 4, which is our perfect square, minus 4, because plus 4 minus 4 is going to give us 0. And then we have the minus 5. That means, well, minus 4 minus 5 is minus 9. X squared minus 4x plus 4 is x minus 2 squared. So we have x minus 2 squared minus 9. We've shown that x squared minus 4x minus 5, this quantity on the left, is equal to the quantity x minus 2 squared minus 9. So our original equation, x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0, means exactly the same thing as x minus 2 quantity squared minus 9 equals 0. Now, how are you going to solve that? Well, add 9 to both sides. We get x minus 2 squared equals 9, and we're back right with the technique that we used to solve this first equation. So we have x minus 2 squared equals 9, means x minus 2 is going to be plus or minus the square root of 9. I've got an etc. here. You can fill in the rest of the steps that you would use to get the same set of reasoning steps that you have here. And we end up with x equals 5 or x equals negative 1, exactly what we would have got by factoring. Again, you wouldn't normally use completing the square to solve a quadratic equation. You would typically either use factoring or the quadratic formula, but you should know how to do it. You need to know how to do it, because I'm going to ask you to do this on a test, using the process of completing the square. Okay. Another problem here, but we'll come back to it. That's an application problem, and we'll talk about that in the next video.